Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Terry Petrovick, and welcome to Straight Talk on the Home Business Radio Network. This is Positive Powered Radio. Today, I have an amazing guest for you, somebody who has changed my life and my family's life already. He is a mentor to literally millions of people. He has taught some of the most popular courses at Harvard. He's the best-selling author of not one, but two books. My guest today is Mr. Shawn Achor. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, Terry.
Well, Shawn, the whole concept of happiness, which I know you're traveling the globe back and forth. I don't know how you do it. It must really give you some joy be able to touch so many people's lives. Let's talk a little bit as our listeners are in the home-based business profession. They're trying to climb that corporate ladder so they can maybe, I should say, the entrepreneurial ladder, so they can get off the corporate ladder and maybe be there with their family. Talk about why going on this journey towards happiness is so significant.
It's a great question. You're right, and it's at the heart of the work that I've been doing in the field called positive psychology, which is we've been looking at the connection between happiness and success. And I think the only reason that we want to be successful is that we think that it's going to create some sort of happiness for us in the future. Like I want to be able to develop a home-based business because I will feel happier if I can spend time with my family, if I can deepen those relationships, all of that. But one of the things we found fascinating about this research was that the order in which somebody strove in their life for happiness and success actually had a huge implication for their ability to create success, their ability to sustain positive change in the midst of challenges. And this work I initially did when I was in a surprising place, actually. I was studying happiness at Harvard with all these students who, in many ways, were already extremely successful. I did a study of 1,600 Harvard students, and we were looking at what causes them to rise to the top. And what we noticed was that no matter how happy they were with getting the acceptance letter, getting to go to a school that they wanted to go to, almost 2 or 3 weeks into the semester of their first year there, their brains stopped focusing on the privilege of being there, that happiness they thought that success would create for them. And their brains started focusing on all the competition, the workload, the stresses, and the hassle. And what we found was that their levels of success actually dropped as they became more negative. What we started looking at was that it taught us something really important, that oftentimes we think, oh, if I can just have this level of success, then I'll be happier. But what we found initially with this research we were doing at Harvard, and now I've done this work with over a third of the Fortune 100 companies, and I've traveled to research and lecture in over 50 countries over the past 6 years. And what we've found is that if we can focus on creating greater levels of happiness in the present, if we can deepen our social connections now, if we can raise our levels of optimism, if we can change the way that we see stress from a threat into a challenge, it turns out every single business and educational outcome rises dramatically for a human being, which is incredible. So in other words, to summarize that, what we found was that if we raise your levels of success the rest of your life, if you actually are more successful, if you do create that business, if you hit those certain targets that you want to financially, your happiness levels actually flatline. There's no greater levels of happiness based upon success. But if you flip around the formula, if you find a way of getting your brain to become more positive, it turns out every single success rate rises dramatically. We're more productive, our sales size, our energy improves, our health improves, and incredibly so. We found a 31% increase cross industry for sales, for productivity when people were positive. We got a 37% increase cost industry in terms of sales when people move from neutral to positive. We found people have 23% fewer stress-related symptoms. We found that people live longer. We found that they're 40% more likely to receive promotions. Basically, every single business and educational outcome improves when the brain is positive. So, Terry, I think that's why I think it's this research wrapped around this concept called the happiness advantage that shows us why happiness could actually be crucial to being more successful in a home-based business.
Well, it's fascinating to me that, I work with Nearium International, and the founder of that company is Jeff Olson, and he just started a brand new media company called Live Happy. that the focus on teaching people how to be happy, um, I mean, the impact, I get into a conversation sometime and people ask me this question. I'd love to hear your answer on it is, okay, when can I expect a return? What's my ROI on, okay, if I do all this happiness stuff, if I go down this path, when can I expect a return? Talk a little bit about that.
That's a great question. So the return on investment is actually both short term and long term. So the short term is if you start creating these positive changes, and let me highlight this because I think that it's crucial. One of the things we found in this research is that if you just try and change your mindset to positive, you actually don't receive a long term return on investment. You have a mindset change without a behavioral change is very short lived. If you link, however, a mindset change to creating a behavioral change, you change the way that you do work, you create positive habits in your life, like writing down things you're grateful for, exercising or meditating, or writing positive emails to people. What we found is that there's a short-term and a long-term return on that investment. The short-term is we find that almost immediately your brain starts recognizing these nodes of meaning that are in your life. The more you practice these gratitudes, for example, your brain trains itself to scan the world for the positive. By day 28, we can actually see changes to your neural pathways in your brain. In other words, we can actually watch your brain reknit to be able to become better at finding the things that are positive in your everyday environment. Increasing your optimism is actually the greatest predictor of entrepreneurial success. It's actually the greatest predictor of sales that we've seen. So we know that that's a crucial step that's occurring, and that occurs in less than 28 days. But within 2 or 3 days, actually on the day you do it, you get a return on investment in terms of the positive feelings you feel, which fuel greater levels of energy. So for example, one of the habits we had people do at Facebook is we had them for 2 minutes a day write a positive email praising or thanking one person that they know in their life. A very simple exercise for them to do. What happens is they actually get addicted to it within 2 or 3 days because they spend all day long thinking about how amazing they were for writing that email. But not only do they feel good about that email, they get positive emails back. They're more likely to praise other people, which actually increases their own positive leadership. But their brain at the same time is reaping the immediate advantage of realizing you have strong social connection. So instead of your brain being focused on the negative, which it very easily can do if you turn on the news or if you look at what's going on in the changes to the political or economic landscape, your brain can be immediately bombarded by the negative. But by creating positive change, you can create the short-term return on investment of getting your brain to focus on things it can actually do to make positive changes. In the long run, what we found is that these habits actually have a long-term return on investment as well. The stats on sales, the sales increases we've seen within just a 6-month period of time at MetLife. One of the founders of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman, found that by year one, the optimists who had been brought on who were low on this industry standard test, so not the smartest of the insurance salesmen at MetLife, but the most optimistic ones, outsold their pessimistic counterparts by 19% by year one and 57% by year two.
Wow.
So what we see is that this is a short-term and long-term benefits.
So how a lot of our listeners are parents. How does this relate to parenting and how do we get our children not to, I don't want to say be bullied or be pressured by their peers, they're become not happy because they're always comparing themselves. How do we get our kids to, embrace the whole happiness advantage concept?
To me, it's crucial, and it's becoming more and more important to me as I'm actually going to become a father
Congratulations.
in just a few months. So I'm so excited about. But
Now, are you going to experiment on your baby is what I want to know.
I'm definitely experimenting with my baby. But as I've heard from many other professors that they told me that they start experimenting on you pretty quickly as well. So I'm trying to learn a lot more about happiness. But I think all these things, I think the earlier you could start teaching positive psychology to an individual, the more likely their brain has the potential to create change. Now, we can change a human brain at any point in life. Some studies have been done previously, have been done on 84-year-old men who continually tested pessimists. And we were able to change them despite their genes and practicing this for 84 years. But if you can teach a child at the age of 4 to write down 3 things that they're actually to say out loud 3 things they're grateful for around the dinner table, 3 new things a day, their brain actually gets better and better, becomes an expert at scanning the world for the positives that move you forward instead of getting bogged down with the negatives or the belief that your behavior doesn't matter. And so I really believe that all the principles in the happiness advantage, and you can see it was supposed to be just a business book, but I couldn't help myself because the research had such huge implications for the ways that we train our children. But one of the things that I think is crucial to remember is that if we want to create positive children, we actually have to do the work ourselves. We actually have to create some of these positive habits. That yes, happiness is a choice, but it's a choice that's influenced by the role models that we see around us. And if we're coming home always stressed, or if we're always constantly talking about all the things we're worried about with work or the uncertainties that are going on in the world and politics and in the economy, our kids pick that up. And I've heard 5-year-olds worried that they're not going to get a job when they graduate from college. And like that's, that's 20 years down the road, but they're picking this up from their parents. So I think that there's a really important role here in modeling this idea that if you create a positive brain first, your success rates will rise. But we don't want to make the idea of thinking that, hey, if you just keep working hard, you're going to be happy once you're successful, because 80% of those Harvard students go through work debilitating depression at some point. And what we're finding is even at the highest levels of the Fortune 100 companies, we're finding that even the best paid individuals at the highest levels of the organization, the most successful, are actually sometimes the least happy.
Interesting. Talk just briefly as we wrap up our show here today about your two books, The Happiness Advantage and Before Happiness, and what's different about them and what our readers can expect, or listeners can expect from them.
So The Happiness Advantage is the first book I wrote. It was on all of this research that shows that we need to reverse the happiness and success formula. And it had 7 habits in there that were basically problem-solving strategies for helping you to create positive change. How do you make it so that you can create greater level of happiness in your life? As I've been going around giving these lectures, and after, I had a TED Talk, which you can see online. It's a free talk on TED.com, TED.com, that had a 12-minute video that got seen by like 5 million people. We had all these emails that came in from people who made changes to their life, but then there were tons of people who listened to the information, but then didn't make any change. And so the next book I wrote was called Before Happiness. And while the first book is Happiness Comes Before Success, Before Happiness, which actually just came out, the focus of it is how do we, before we can even start making changes to happiness and success, we first have to believe that change is possible. So how do you get yourself, and more importantly, the people around you, to believe that change is possible? So it goes through the strategy we've been researching ever since about how we can infect other people with that positive belief.
Yeah. And where can people purchase those books?
Those books are available on everywhere. Amazon, I think, is one of the cheapest. Barnes & Noble has it. It's on e-readers, and they have an audiobook of it as well, if that's easier for some people.
Awesome. And if somebody wants to connect with you, Shawn, how can they do that?
Please come to our website, just happinessadvantage.com, or join me on my Facebook page. It's Shawn Achor, Achor. And I would love to see you there and to continue the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Shawn, for your time. And for those of you listening, get the books, connect with Shawn. It's an amazing philosophy. And you can also connect with me. My name is Terry Petrovick. And remember this, my friends, we're in this together. Until next time, make it a better than terrific day, and a happy and a prosperous one. Bye-bye for now.